Hello and welcome back to another glimpse at the unseen future of the Sega Dreamcast. In this episode we'll be exploring more into the library of games the console could have had if things had turned out differently. This is a further look at an alternate timeline where the Dreamcast reigned supreme and continued to gain more incredible releases long after its cancellation. This is episode 3 of the games that never were. Legend of the Blade Masters by Ronin Entertainment was an action-adventure RPG that was announced in 1999 for both PC and Dreamcast. The story of the game takes place in a world once occupied by dragons, which were constantly fighting among themselves over possession of the 5 elements: earth, wind, water, wood, and fire. A great war was fought, and in the end only 5 dragons survived. Tired from the battle, the dragons rested in caves scattered throughout the land. While they slept, humans became the dominant force in the world thanks to the efforts of one king. There was peace for thousands of years until one day when black holes began opening across the land, and from out of them came many evil creatures. The creatures started to wreak havoc on all that the humans had built, and so the king called upon a wizard to summon the legendary dragons, who were able to defeat the evil beings. However, after these events, the wizard betrayed the king and summoned a demon to help him destroy the kingdom and imprison the dragons in 5 swords. However, things didn't go as planned for the wizard, and he himself was betrayed by the demon, who scattered the swords across the land. In the game, you play as the 17-year-old orphan named Eric Valdemar, who is sent on a journey along with 4 of the king's knights to find the 5 swords. Legend of the Blade Masters was to be a fairly standard RPG with plenty of land to explore, quests to partake in, and enemies to kill. The battles were to take place in real time, with you controlling the main character and giving commands to your teammates. The combat system revolved around timing, with the enemies showing a colored aura around them to indicate when they're most vulnerable. If the color surrounding the enemy is dark, your chances of hitting them are slim, but if it's a light color, you have a good chance of landing a critical hit. Along with your standard attack, you also had magic spells which you could cast using crystals that you find throughout the world. You could also find potions which could be used to enchant your weapons with different elemental abilities. Along with the single-player campaign, the game was also to feature an online multiplayer mode in which both Dreamcast and PC players could play alongside each other. The multiplayer mode was to feature more enemies than the single-player mode, much like Phantasy Star Online. The cancellation of Legend of the Blade Masters is a baffling one. In an interview with GameSpot on July 25, 2000, the developers stated that the release was only a couple weeks away, but despite this, the game seems to have simply vanished. There are many articles stating that the game was very close to completion, so it's a mystery why Ronin Entertainment decided not to release it. Chances are very good that a playable version of the game is out there somewhere. Half-Life by Valve Corporation is a first-person shooter that was released on PC in 1998 and announced for the Dreamcast in February of 2000. In the game, you play as a scientist named Gordon Freeman who works at the Black Mesa Research Facility in the New Mexico desert. While working on an experiment one day, things go horribly wrong and a portal to another dimension is opened up and releases hostile aliens into the facility. Immediately after the incident, you frantically search for survivors and try to escape the building. It's not long before you find out you're in danger not only from the aliens but from government agents that are sent to cover up the incident by eliminating everyone and everything in Black Mesa. The Dreamcast version of Half-Life wasn't going to be just a straight port of the PC version. It featured higher polygon counts, higher texture resolutions, and better lighting. Not only that, but it also included a Dreamcast exclusive add-on called Blue Shift, which added an additional 27 missions and another 6 to 10 hours of gameplay. Along with the single-player campaign, the game was originally to include a second disc with Valve's online multiplayer games such as Opposing Force, Team Fortress, and Half-Life Deathmatch. Unfortunately, this was scrapped later in the development of the game. The Dreamcast version of Half-Life was literally set to be the premier version with its improved graphics, additional missions, and many other new features. The game was originally set to be released in the summer of 2000, but was delayed several times until June 2001, when Valve officially cancelled the game only a few weeks ahead of its latest release date. Valve cited changing market conditions as the reason for the cancellation. In 2003, a late build of the game was leaked onto the internet where it can be downloaded to this day. The leaked build is very close to completion and is perfectly playable, albeit with a spattering of long load times. The Blue Shift add-on was eventually released on PC, and a lot of the higher resolution models and textures used in the Dreamcast version were included in the Half-Life High Definition pack. Dragon's Crown, developed by Vanillaware, is a 2D side-scrolling action RPG that started development in 1998 for the Dreamcast. The game is a direct sequel to Princess Crown, which was released on the Sega Saturn the previous year. The game takes place below the kingdom of Hydeland, where you as one of 6 adventurers must navigate treacherous labyrinths and dungeons in search of the legendary Dragon's Crown. Along the way, you'll search for treasure and battle many dangerous creatures. The game plays very much like a traditional beat-em-up, with the ability to move up, down, left, and right while taking out all the baddies on the screen and proceeding on. Depending on the character you choose at the beginning of the game, you would have multiple different attacks and skills ranging from swinging a sword to casting spells and shooting a bow. Being an RPG, your character will earn experience points as you play through the game, which will level up your character, gain you new abilities, and increase your stats. As you progress through the game's dungeons, you'll be able to choose between branching paths, so the game isn't completely linear. In addition to slaying monsters, you'll also be hunting for loot, which you can exchange for supplies in the game's hub town. With the exception of fighters, the Dreamcast really didn't have a big library of 2D games, so Dragon's Crown would have been a welcome addition to the system. Unfortunately, it was never meant to be, as Vanillaware was unable to find a publisher to support the project on the Dreamcast. Due to this, the game never got out of the planning stages, and only some concept art of the Dreamcast version exists today. However, the game was eventually released in July of 2013 on both PlayStation 3 and Vita. World's Scariest Police Chases, Deadly Pursuit by Teeny Weeny Games was an action driving game based off of the Fox TV series of the same name. In the game, you choose to play as either the cop or criminal and engage in a high-speed pursuit with the goal of either catching the bad guy or escaping the law, depending on which side you choose. If your driving abilities weren't enough, you could also take out vehicles using your weapons arsenal. The developers really wanted the player to feel like they were taking part in a real-life high-speed chase, with eye-in-the-sky TV news helicopters following you as you race down the road. After each chase, you'd be able to play it back in the game's replay mode as if it were a television news report. Deadly Pursuit was to be one of the very few Dreamcast games to support the microphone accessory, with the ability to call for backup or other requests when playing as the police. The game was to have over 75 different missions, which could be played from either side of the law, and featured 2-player co-op and deathmatch modes, which could be played locally or via the internet. World's Scariest Police Chases Deadly Pursuit was originally scheduled for release in summer of 2001, but was most likely cancelled due to the discontinuation of the Dreamcast. After the cancellation, development moved over to the PlayStation 1 under a different developer, and as a result, the released game was completely different from the version intended for the Dreamcast. Gorka Morka was a car combat game being developed by Real Sports for both PC and Dreamcast, and was based off of the board game of the same name. Like the board game, Gorka Morka was based in the Warhammer 40,000 universe and has the player racing weaponized vehicles driven by orcs. Each of these vehicles houses 2 orcs, one of which mans the wheel and the other is in charge of blowing up your opponents with a variety of weapons. In single player, you could freely switch between driving and shooting, while in multiplayer you could have a friend take control of one of these positions. The game was to feature both local and online multiplayer, the latter of which would support up to 16 players at once, either 8 cars with 2 passengers each or 16 cars driven independently. In the single player mode, you could earn money by damaging your opponents and winning races. The cash could then be spent on upgrading and repairing your vehicle, as well as leveling up your computer-controlled partner to make him better at either driving or operating weaponry. Every race you win in the game would gain you more of a fan base, and as a result you would see more spectators in the stadium the next time you raced. The tracks in Gorka Morka were to be very futuristic and gritty, much like the universe the game is based off of. Both battle arenas and standard racing tracks were planned for the game. The racing tracks were far from regulation though, as they featured various traps which you had to keep an eye out for during races or risk being blown to Kingdom Come. The game also featured 20 plus different vehicles, which could all be customized and upgraded to your liking. Overall, Gorka Morka was shaping up to be a very unique racing experience, combining elements of car combat, demolition racing, a fantasy world, and even some RPG elements thrown in for good measure. The game was originally set to be released in the winter of 2000, but both the PC and Dreamcast versions of the game were cancelled for unknown reasons. A PC demo of the game was released online in 2001, but appears to be from a very early build of the game and is extremely buggy. The Dreamcast library at one time was looking to get a huge boost from a myriad of fantastic titles, many of which took advantage of the online capabilities of the system. While the Dreamcast may not have been a commercial success, it was way ahead of its time, making a push for online gaming way before the introduction of Xbox Live and PlayStation Network. It's this forward thinking, and of course the console's fantastic library of games, that keep the Dreamcast relevant today, even after its discontinuation over a decade ago. That's it for this episode of The Games That Never Were, and until next time, thanks for watching.